January 2016 North Miami Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Committee meeting. Can we have a roll call?
Mr. Aristide?
Yes.
Ms. Cobo? Here. Ms. Cohen? Mr. Each said he would be out of town.
Yes, please excuse him.
Ms. Estime Irvin? Ms. Geimer? Here. Mr. McDermott?
Here.
Dr. Milian?
Here.
Dr. Moise?
Right here.
Mr. Reynolds?
Here.
Mr. Robillard? Mr. Sanchez?
Oh, yeah.
We have quorum.
Very good. We have our
How are you?
Extras.
okay. And can we have the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. The first item to be discussed is the interim executive director's salary increase.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Happy New Year, by the way. Thank you so much for coming. At the November 10th, 2015 council meeting, the council members voted to request that the CRA board grant a $25,000 stipend to the interim executive director. This increase represents approximately $481 a week during their current arrangement. As you know, Mr. Sori has been the interim city manager since October 13th, and they made arrangements to increase his salary from deputy city manager to the city manager, and part of his salary was coming out of the CRA. So the city council voted to make the appropriate increase on the city side, and they are asking the CRA board to make the same amount. It really is pretty much like it's $5,000 increase because he was already getting the $20,000 stipend. So we are asking, and staff has recommended approval, we are asking the advisory committee's recommendation to approve the interim executive director's stipend increase.
Okay. Well, I can say that the performance of the CRA has changed dramatically for the better since Mr. Sori has been in charge with the other staff, with Rasha. So I think that, in my mind, I think that the increase is necessary, and I think it's well warranted. And if somebody would like to make a motion that we approve that.
I moved it, just for clarification. The $25,000, is that for Mr. Sori?
Yes.
Let me, Arthur Sori, let me say it's additional $5,000. I already received 20. Oh, you said
Explained
that?
it.
Yes, she already explained
Yeah,
that.
we already explained it.
Okay, so we have a second? Okay.
I'm sorry, Dr. Milian, second?
Okay, is there any discussion?
Mr. Sori, are you now the current and temporary city manager, or are you the city manager?
I'm still currently the interim city manager. I believe a decision will be made within the next 2-3 weeks.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would just like to say, first of all, as we know, Mr. Sori serves as the interim executive director because he is the city manager, and
Right.
the CRA does pay a portion of his salary. I would just, again, remind everyone and staff that we should keep some record keeping with time as to the time you devote to the CRA in case of an audit in the future. Then we can justify the time you spend. I know you spend a lot of time working for the CRA. Personally, I know that, but we should just have some backup on that as well.
Okay.
I'm sure we do. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Congratulations. Okay, item 2 is a request for a rehabilitation grant from 20 Northeast LLC.
Yes, and the agenda has the correct address, but on the narrative, I made a typo that Ms. Geimer caught for me. It's 13390-94. In the narrative, I have 13890. So just to note my mistake. So the address is 13390-94 West Dixie Highway. As you can see in the pictures, it's the orange Sims building.
Right.
They would like to renovate it. They recently purchased it and they're trying to fix it up so they can lease it out. The only caveat is they're in the process of renovating it at this time, and they were not able to get the rest of the bids that they wanted to do a full rehab grant of up to $80,000. So this is part one of the grant request, which is up to $35,500 for new awnings around the building and impact windows and doors on the inside, so that they can start leasing the space. They intend to come back and request for an additional grant for painting and fencing around the property. I discussed this with our attorney, and as long as the request doesn't go above the $80,000, guideline, it's fine for them to come back and present it if you are okay with it. Ms. Rojas is here as the property owner if you have any questions.
Okay.
But it's pretty much for the rehab, and you can see what's great is I think everybody knows the building already because it's been there, for a while. But showing the property around it, the bank, and so on, and the renovations that she wants to do to this building, I think is a great thing and a great addition to the West Dixie corridor that we're trying to beautify. Staff is recommending approval.
Is that the Sims musical?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there are no waivers, there are no code violations. And this is, again, not only to improve the aesthetics of that building, but it's also for them to be able to lease it out to multiple tenants. And she's aware that once the grant is complete, she has a certain time frame to meet the leasing requirement, or else she would have to pay us back the full grant.
Can I have a copy of the hard copy, please?
And this is the Quinn Laundry, right? Is that the Quinn Laundry building?
Next to it?
Or next,
Yes.
or the other one? Because it looks like this is showing,
No,
Look at the back
she
page.
has, yeah,
okay.
it's double-sided.
I'm sorry.
No problem,
Thanks.
no problem. So, unless you have any questions?
Okay. Ms. Rojas, you want to
Hi,
tell us about what you're doing? Can
we're
you introduce yourself into the microphone, please?
Miriam Rojas. I am actually the managing agent for 20 Northeast LLC. And we're just doing a rehab of the building. It's 1990, has always had sim music in it, and it's in good shape on the inside. It's just outside needs a little bit of love.
Tender loving care.
Yes. So we're just looking to get it up to speed with and renting it retail, in efforts to help also rehab that corridor as well. It's such a prominent building, so it's and next to Bank of America and whatnot. So I think it would be great to do new windows and the painting, even just that, and then the safety around the parking lot in the back by fencing it in as well.
Yeah, anything we can do to help West Dixie, because it
I have a
certainly
question
is.
for you. Is it currently vacant?
Yes.
Is it, I've never been in the building. Is it, are you planning on putting one tenant or multiple tenants in it?
There was the option as one tenant, but it probably will be multiple at this time. So we're actually looking to get the Police Athletic League is probably going to take over the second floor, and then the bottom floor will be only retail, pretty much retail, hopefully a cafe, maybe a restaurant. We'll see.
Okay, anybody have any other questions?
It's a good project.
Yeah, do I hear a motion, Clark? to
I do,
approve?
yes, I'll move it.
Okay,
Second.
second. Any other discussion? Okay, Ms. Rojas, thank you very much.
Thank you. All in favor?
All in favor?
Yeah, I said all in favor.
No, you didn't.
No, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, okay.
Okay.
Question.
Thank you, Steve.
How long does it take from the time of voting to actually get the money so they can go ahead and start the process?
Well, after your action here tonight, it goes to the CRA board. Would this be on the next agenda?
Yes,
So it'll be on the
Tuesday.
next agenda. Presuming that they approve it, and it would probably take a couple weeks to get the grant agreement and the paperwork from my office over to the CRA staff. The grant agreement would then be executed, and then they will go ahead. At that point, the money's there, so it's up to the applicant at that point to process their building permits and move forward with the project. And as they move forward, they will come in to visit with staff.
And it is a reimbursement. So
Right.
it's not like just the agreement is signed and the money is available right away. We open up a purchase order, but it's on a reimbursement basis.
But they could go ahead and start permitting and everything right
Well,
now.
yeah.
Because they know what's
certainly
gonna
could,
happen.
yeah.
Okay. Anything else, Duncan, Lewis?
No, no, no.
Okay, item 3 is a CRA plan update presentation.
Yeah, we gotta move.
Good evening, Happy New Year. Kevin Crowder with RMA. Some of you have seen a bit of the content that's in here, and then there's some additional pieces that have been added post the workshop that was done back in October. We're also going to talk a little bit about the TIF projections and that component that will be part of the amended or new interlocal agreement with Miami-Dade County. Just as a reminder, our scope of work was to update the background and the existing conditions, to look at the past plans that have been done for the city and the CRA for the CRA area, to analyze the P3 opportunities that have been identified and were identified in the downtown plan, to look at the potential TIF revenue, to draft the update to the redevelopment plan, including, again, the amendments to the interlocal agreement, and then taking the approval of the plan through the adoption both here at the city as well as at Miami-Dade County. Just real quick, the amendment is needed because basically the current plan will expire October 1st. The CRA was created originally with just 11 years. We're proposing an extension of an additional 29 years, which would give it the full 40 years authorized by state statute from the original date of creation. And obviously the purpose is to continue to address the conditions in the redevelopment area and grow the increment revenue where it's available to invest in the additional projects for the area throughout the 29 years. This is just an update. I've mentioned part of our scope was to review the prior plans that have been done. These are the plans that have been done basically just since 2008 for the redevelopment area, and especially the downtown part of the CRA. Again, you have a very large CRA. It comprises 60% of the city, stretches from Northwest 17th Avenue all the way over to Biscayne, and then jumps across Biscayne, both for one small part down at San Souci, but then the old Munisport site where Biscayne Landing, now Solomia project, is taking place. One of the things we do in our approach is we ask ourselves some questions as we're working in a community, and it's just based on experience with other successful redevelopment stories in Florida. And we ask ourselves, what's the most important thing to enhance for economic development in North Miami? What's the most important thing to expose? What's here that if people knew about it, if investors knew about it, it could be a game changer? What's the most important thing to invest in for economic growth? What's the most important thing to capitalize on? And what's that opportunity? What's the thing to preserve for economic growth? There's no single right answer to these questions. They're very subjective, but they help guide us as we do our planning. Everyone will have their own ideas of that. But as we went through this process, we came out with some ideas. And I think you'll see some of these come out as we walk through the goals and objectives. And what we saw was the enhancement to make is downtown and improving the commercial corridors. 125th Street, West Dixie Highway, Northwest 7th Avenue, Northeast 6th Avenue. That those corridors in downtown, that's the enhancement that will drive that economic growth throughout the rest of the CRA, especially starting in downtown. What do you have to expose to that? What exists here that if people knew about it, it could be a game changer? you have this incredible music industry opportunity that we're going to touch on here in a moment. What are the most important things to invest in? These public-private partnership opportunities, again, here in the downtown, as well as at basically the next one, which is capitalize. What do you have to capitalize on? That is the Tri-Rail Coastal Link, which is also another P3 opportunity for mixed-use development around where the Tri-Rail station will be at 125th. That is the thing to capitalize on. That is a regional game changer that will connect 125th Street via commuter rail to West Palm Beach and downtown Miami. What that does in terms of market access is the best thing to capitalize on for this CRA. And again, making that connection between that station back to downtown, down that 125th Street corridor. And then what's the most important thing to preserve? We think here the most important thing to preserve is the neighborhood character, that is such an important part of the CRA. So just to go through the goals, the first goal is economic development, because economic development is what is going to drive the tax-based growth that's going to create the increment that the CRA can use for the additional projects that are needed throughout this 29-year extension. And economic development starts in downtown, and it starts with public-private partnership. It starts with the 3 sites that had previously been identified in the downtown master plan. You're all familiar with those sites. We did some financial feasibility analysis of those to see how they would look in the marketplace. It includes the City Hall parking lot east of this building. It includes the parking lot behind the retail on the north side of 125th Street, which you see here. It includes what's called the Mocha lot. All of these include potentially adjacent privately owned property. That is a detail to be worked out through the public-private partnership process, and with even additional opportunities. Also, besides the Mocha lot, are there opportunities for public-private partnership in the larger municipal civic complex here? And there is a lot of interest, and overall we're seeing an increase in developer and investor interest in North Miami already. And so you're positioning very well in the marketplace for this downtown, and to really be able to guide what those partnerships look like. Now, part of downtown is not just about these public-private partnerships and these big investments. It's also about business retention and the businesses that you do have here, and the small businesses, the entrepreneurs, that small business development. So maintaining these programs that you have, the commercial rehab programs, the beautification grants, merchant assistance programs. We've seen these be very successful in places like Northwood Village in West Palm Beach, and in the East CRA in Pompano Beach, and in Dania Beach, have all done very well with the merchant assistance programs. We want to make sure that the ability to do those programs is added into the CRA plan. Commercial clean team and code enforcement. You know, the 3 things that have been found that connect people to place and really create a place that people want to be are aesthetics, activities, and openness, how welcoming a place is. And so the clean team and the code enforcement element of the CRA plan is a critical piece to promoting downtown and expanding that into the commercial corridors as redevelopment happens. Goal number 2 is the commercial corridors. Working with the private sector to identify opportunities where assemblage makes sense for redevelopment and for development. This can be 6th Avenue, this can be West Dixie Highway, this can be the opportunities that exist along Northwest 7th Avenue. Also working with FDOT. The thing about your commercial corridors and your downtown, 125th Street, West Dixie Highway, 6th Avenue, Northwest 7th Avenue, these are all, and even your western boundary of Biscayne, these are all state roads. So there's a huge amount of your economic development and redevelopment that is out of your control and is in control of a state agency. And working with FDOT is gonna be critical to this. And we're finding FDOT seems to be a little more flexible. There's complete streets is the word that's out there that a lot of people talk about, but it's about introducing that making it a place, these state roads, a place where people want to go to, not through. And just to illustrate that, the city of Pompano Beach and the CRA, if you're familiar with Pompano, you get off of I-95 and you come down Atlantic Boulevard and there's South Dixie Highway. Well, that intersection, the southeast corner is where City Hall and the cultural complex will be. The northeast corner is Old Pompano, downtown. The northwest corner is where they envision will be the employment center. That's where the office development and all of that will take place. But it's bisected by these two state roads. 3 weeks ago, the Pompano Beach City Commission voted unanimously to assume control of those two roads from FDOT. And so those two roads in that CRA will now be maintained, renovated, revitalized as the downtown and not as state roads. And so working with FDOT, now I'm not saying that's the solution here, but working with FDOT is going to be a critical piece of implementing redevelopment in North Miami. Next piece is targeted industries and uses. And part of this is identifying the existing clusters that you have and identifying new opportunities and looking at what do you have to capitalize on. And this is where we come to that second point that we had, which was, what do you have to expose? What do you already have that if you could tie it together, it could be a game changer? And what we looked at, what we identified is film. You have, music. You have a lot of film and music and culture and all of these different activities and these different anchors here, but they're really not connected. You know, space music, you just did the grant for the Sim building. That's the building I always took all of my music gear to get serviced, which I had bought at Space Music, and now that service has moved into space. But what we found is you have the hip factory here, Criteria. Criteria is as important a recording studio in the history of American music as any studio in the United States. As Muscle Shoals, there was a great documentary done a couple years ago on Muscle Shoals. We'd like to see one done on Criteria. Criteria's first gold record was I Feel Good. Criteria is where Dwayne Allman and Eric Clapton were in two separate studios and they came together to record Layla. Even part of Hotel California was recorded here, obviously Saturday Night Fever, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of chart toppers have been recorded here. It is an important venue that's still operating and still has top performers recording. We looked at the area around Criteria. All of these yellow pins are recording studios. So it's just not Criteria that you have here. You have this cluster of recording studios that have come into this market and into this area. Next thing we looked at is we expanded that and we said, well, let's not look just at recording studios. Let's look at music stores, places like Space. Let's look at rehearsal facilities. Let's look at the performance venues. Where do working bands, not lounges and not cover bands in sports bars and that type of thing, but where do the working bands play and perform? 15 months ago, there were 14 venues for that in Dade County, and today there's about 3, maybe 4. They've all been closing because they've all been feeling a lot of real estate pressure. It's not that they themselves weren't succeeding. So what we looked at is it's kind of hard to see, but you can see we've got a couple of little venues on the beach. We've still got Churchill's down here at 54th. There was a place out here in West Dade, which closed 3 weeks ago. There's one up in Hallandale. But as you look, you see a couple of music stores and rehearsal facilities scattered around Dade County. But again, you come back up here to this big cluster in North Miami. It's not just the recording studios. It is places like Space. It is the other infrastructure. You have some music schools here. The point of this is you have an existing industry that has made North Miami home, and that word needs to get out, and that needs to be built upon, and it's something that you can capitalize on. You have, with the shakeup in the venue side of this industry in Dade County, a huge opportunity right now. All of these venues operators are out in the market looking for new locations. So we think that this is a great branding opportunity. We think it's very similar to what happened with the Cultural Arts District in downtown Oakland Park, which grew very fast. Over here on 7th Avenue, we know that there's interest. Down in the county CRA, which is south of 119th Street on 7th Avenue, Mark Anthony's already made an investment in that area. And so you have a lot of potential here that can grow into those other entertainment industry assets, many of which you already have, which then grows into culture and really starts building on itself as creating that identity and helping drive just the additional investment, as I mentioned, which you're already seeing interest in. Also, what's called a vanilla box program, an assistance program for property owners so they can get their space into shape where it's competitive with other vacant space in the marketplace, especially shopping center space that it may be competing with. And then the arts, still under economic development. The arts are a critical component of economic development. MOCA is a critical element of that, and then everything that can be supported through the arts out and beyond that. It can be residential, it can be artist lofts, it can be really creating, again, that creative community, those aesthetics, those activities. It links into special events, those activities where people can engage with each other, which creates that sense of activity in downtowns, which again helps drive that investment interest and show the private sector what the opportunities are. That piece leads into branding and marketing, business recruitment, business attraction. Quality of life, again, comes back to those special events, public outreach, image. The third area is public improvements and infrastructure, streetscape projects, starting along the commercial corridors, as we mentioned. We've got the commercial corridor element of economic development goal. Then we've got the streetscape element of public improvements along those corridors. Again, this is where we come back. That work with FDOT will be needed. But again, focusing first on revitalizing those commercial corridors so you can drive that economic growth that's going to grow the tax base. And then from there, as you build through the plan, the open space and community enhancements that have been identified and will still be identified throughout the life of the CRA, wayfinding, and then moving into neighborhood improvement programs, the residential areas, swells, code enforcement, safety and security, design issues, throughout all of the different neighborhoods that are in the CRA. But using the economic development, again, as what's going to drive the increment growth to be able to fund the projects as you get into the later years of the CRA. The next goals are housing related, really focusing on a healthy mix of affordable workforce market rate and mixed income housing, and even luxury. You have the Solomia project over. And building into the plan the flexibility for the CRA to respond to market conditions. Because what the housing market conditions are today are not what they're going to be in 10 years or not what they're going to be in 20 years. And so usually what happens in the early days of a CRA, affordable housing is not the need. Affordable housing is usually the reality. That's usually what the market is. And it's bringing in this other mix of uses. We're seeing this happen in North Miami Beach right now along 164th Street in a way that's changing the market. And bringing those additional uses and mixes, but then as the housing market grows and as it moves up, we saw Miami Beach do this with a purchase of 3 buildings by the convention center in the late years of their CRA, being able to adjust as housing prices get up to do what the market needs done to still maintain that healthy mix and make sure you have that workforce and affordable housing still within your CRA. That again goes back to that thing that we talked about, what's the most important thing to preserve? It's that neighborhood character. And so we want the CRA to be able to be flexible to those market conditions when it comes to housing, to work with the private sector organizations that are tasked with providing and addressing housing issues, whether it's through the Community Development Block Grant Program, through the Home Program, through the state programs or other public sector programs, and work in partnership with those agencies that have that primary mission of doing housing. And then programs that may be provided also come to the home beautification, home buyer subsidies, et cetera, which many CRAs do. Number 10 is transportation and transit. Traffic circulation, transit, local circulators, connections to regional transit, even identifying other transit initiatives. What you don't see on this slide, because it's part of what we talked about with public-private partnership, is the Tri-Rail Coastal Link. That is an economic development project that, again, is linked to this, but is more than just that. It's a real opportunity for attracting that additional mixed-use investment around the station area that, again, will help grow the tax base and grow North Miami CRA's position in the marketplace. Bicycle-friendly initiatives. We've seen just an explosion over the past few years in Dade County on bicycles for transportation, for recreation, a lot of awareness, a lot of events, a lot of activities. Building on that, it's a great community for targeting that sort of initiative. And public parking development, again, linking back to economic development and those public-private partnership opportunities in the downtown. Development of public parking facilities, as well as looking at shared parking strategies. And there may be some even additional parking strategies that the CRA can look at, or will work with the city to look at. Parking is usually one of the best opportunities you have for economic development from the public sector. Miami Beach, Pompano Beach, even Miami, there's been a lot of examples of successful use and management of parking as an economic development tool. And then we have a couple of goals which are really redevelopment support. We really have the four main areas, which is economic development, the infrastructure, the residential and quality life, and then the transit, transportation, and parking. And then the fifth area that we have goals in is the redevelopment support, because these all link back to several of those. It could link to transit, it could link to economic development, it could support all four of those areas. So we put them in a place called redevelopment support. It includes that consistency with the comp plan, consistency with the zoning, identifying those places where the zoning code, comp plan uses could be enhanced and could enhance economic growth and investment in the area. This is where the land acquisition and disposition strategies, the power to engage in real estate transactions, as well as economic incentives, because there's the ability to do incentives through the CRA is significant, but you're going to be able to do these at some future point. It may be for housing. Very soon, it might be for a transit facility. It might be for public-private partnerships. It's already for businesses and buildings that you have in the CRA. So those are the 14 goals that we've identified for the plan with those initiatives tied to them. Again, just to kind of bring it back, when we talk to the county wants to know, what are you going to do and how do you know when you're done? And they're looking to know, how much is that going to cost? And beyond that, let's share in the success. There's been a lot of criticism for CRAs for just taking all of the increment and just finding things to do with it that maybe weren't really necessary and part of the plan. So they wanted a very targeted plan. They want to know what we're going to do. This is really sort of the summary. It links back to all of those goals and initiatives, but we're going to enhance downtown and the commercial corridors. We're going to take this music industry opportunity as one that is a place we can brand and really grow into all of the connected industries that it can bring. Invest in those public-private partnership opportunities in the downtown. Capitalize on the Tri-Rail coastal link, and then preserve the neighborhood character. That's generally the concept of the plan, and then obviously it comes into more detail in those goals and the specific initiatives and projects that are part of it. So how do we do this? We have to pay for it. But in our projections, and we'll walk kind of slow through this. There's going to be a lot of numbers on here, but it shouldn't be confusing. What we've done is we've looked at this plan and we've done our projections on what the tax increment growth would be between 2017, the first year of the extension, and 2045, when the CRE would sunset. We ran the gross numbers, but then we did a net present value calculation to bring it back to current dollars.
What percentage do you use on net present value?
I'm using 5.5%. We may end up refining that through, discussions with the city and, finance department, but 5.5 is generally what we've been using in most of the CRAs where we've been working. So the plans we see it would drive on the west side of Biscayne, $206 million worth of increment over the 29-year period. And you see the city and the county piece of that. The east side, our projections are $166 million over that period through as Solomia gets built out, stabilizes, and comes into the market. And so we see a total increment growth within the CRA area of $372 million over the 29-year period. So we'll just repeat that up here at the top. That $372 million is what the increment will drive. We've priced the plan, the cost of the plan implementation, at $150 million in today's dollars. So the first thing we looked at was, well, what would that give us? To the city portion of the increment, which we'll call here, $234 million. For a $150 million investment, first thing we looked at was, well, if there's no CRA, but what if you wanted to still do this plan? What if you still wanted to revitalize and promote economic development in North Miami, even if there wasn't a CRA? If you made that $150 million investment over the next 29 years, either with or without a CRA, the fiscal impact to the city would be this $235 million. Now, without a CRA, though, you're going to fund all $150 million of that investment. You're still going to get a good return on it. You're still going to get this 57%, this $84 million additional return. But if you have the CRA and if you extend the CRA, you're still going to get that fiscal impact. But because the CRA is a partnership with the county, the cost to North Miami is only $94 million. And so your leverage and your return on investment is much more significant. And we put the return on investment in here because, we've in the conversations with the county and even with the city, the ability to use this for the North Miami CRA to accomplish its mission in redeveloping North Miami, as well as provide a return on investment to the taxing authorities that are funding that investment, is very important. And so that's what we see here. This is that return on investment that after we pay for the redevelopment plan, the return on investment that the taxing authorities can realize is significant.
Can you go back one more time, please? Can you please explain the fiscal impact? And this is impact on what exactly?
What the fiscal impact is that is the property taxes to North Miami from the CRA. And so usually in a CRA, 95% of the taxes go from the city and the county go to the CRA. But it is that $234 million of tax-based growth, of taxes off of the tax base, which are collected by North Miami.
So those are the additional taxes that are available for additional investment from the initial investment, is that right?
Right, throughout the 29 years. And so out of that 234, that's the new growth, and you're going to use 150 of that throughout the 29 years for the redevelopment programs with.
And you're going to get an additional $140 million.
Correct.
To do other things with.
Right.
But that's going to go into the CRA, right? Back into the CRA for other CRA projects.
No, that would go back to the taxing authorities, is the direction that we've been working under. Now, it may not end up being that exact number. So where we get to here is we have the 372 million total generated. We need 150 million. Now, we want to build in some cushion and some contingency in there. But essentially what we need to do is we need to identify the methodology where the CRA maintains $150 million of this $372 million. And frankly, I mean, the conversations with the county have been that they are looking for a return to the general fund of a portion of the CRA dollars, and it not to all be maintained in the CRA.
The current numbers, these are conservative numbers because we haven't changed the numbers for what the new value is solar being yet, have we?
This has our new projections for solar media.
This has our new projections for solar.
Yes, it does. So to get to this $150 million number, and say this number needs to be $175 million or whatever that contingency needs to be in there, Clark, we don't think that you need more than that number to implement the plan and for it to be effective. The options on how you extract, for lack of a better word, $150 million from the 372, there are several. You can do it through an adjustment of the TIF percentage. CRAs are usually 95% of the increment comes to the CRA. South Miami CRA is a 50% increment. It can be anywhere between 50 and 95%. The CRA right now, the increment that's generated on the west side, the county portion of that gets rebated to the county as part of the interlocal. So there are additional creative ways that you can work the interlocal. Another way to do it would be a boundary modification, which reduces the size of the CRA where the TIF is generated. Looking at performance incentives, are there minimum and maximums? Or are there performance incentives that can come to the CRA? And I'll talk about that in a minute, because it may end up not being, depending on the ultimate interlocal agreement with the county, it may not end up being a performance quote incentive. It might just end up being a performance measure. The county may look at certain benchmarks in year 5, year 10, year 15 for performance from the CRA to show that the TIF is being generated in order to reach a certain percentage. And then another opportunity may be revenue sharing, that maybe this is the base, and that between, say, 150 or 180 or 200, whatever that piece is, that there's a sharing between the taxing authorities, and then there's a higher number above which the taxing authorities retain. So these are many of the different opportunities. You know, we're looking at, we've analyzed a lot of them. Some of them get down to really being policy decisions as well. But, you know, we want to come back to what's going to be the simplest thing as well, and something that the county, the city council, and Miami-Dade County can support as part of the adoption of the extension.
Kevin, when you've worked with other CRAs, are they, when you get into this, you talk about incentive and things like that, are those common, or is this a little more complicated than or I've just never known that you had things like this going on. I thought it was just more straightforward.
They're more straightforward. It's not that common. You'll see it here and there, but it's not that common, and we'd like to get to the point that it's as simple as we can make it. You know, a 50% district is simple and an easy way to move forward. You know, we did on the beach did sort of a performance incentive as well as a revenue share with what essentially are South Point CRA dollars, but it was part of the sunset of that CRA, and it was a separate interlocal funding agreement. It was not CRA, but it did have elements of that, but it was tied to other things, not really redevelopment. So as we start looking at and thinking about what are all of those different options, again, say $150 million is the target number. This is where it is. So this is where you start thinking, you know, what are the different scenarios that could be analyzed? Where is the opportunity? You know, we've got a lot of spreadsheets on this that we can run. We logic test a lot of things, looking at 50% districts. What would 75% of the TIF do? Where would those different elements be? And we can come back to any slide that anyone has questions on or wants to talk about more. Just the schedule is coming back and doing a final presentation with the CRA board next week, and then come back in February for approval of the plan, and then the February to April timeframe would be the timeframe for getting the approval from Miami-Dade County.
Seems fast.
It's aggressive, but we had a really good meeting with county staff before the holidays, and you know, barring things out of our control, we think it's realistic to get through that time frame. I mean, the reality may be it may be July before it gets done, but the goal is that it be done before August, and we do have a big enough window to do that. No, you're right. It is aggressive, but we want it to. We intend on trying to push it through as fast as we can at the county and get it done.
I thought, I mean, a lot of talk leading up to this was that we had to go in with not a concept or a general idea of what we wanted to do. We had to go in with a specific one or two projects. I mean, things that were ready to go. That doesn't seem to be the case here.
As you get down into the projects and the initiatives on these pieces, we have that, but we're using. You're right. The concept was we're going to use these P3 projects in the downtown, and that's what we're going to
cost out. And we're going to say,
right.
Okay, you approve it, and we're going to start building in a unit.
And so those projects are within the CRA plan, but they're not in, you know, construction detail. There's not a developer on board yet. There's not a concept plan on those for those yet. There's a separate process that has to be gone through the CRA and the city to actually implement those, but they are the core of goal number one. They're the first element of the economic development goal of the CRA plan, are those downtown projects, as well as really the tri-rail station. Those are the things, and as I mentioned in the discussion with the county, that is something that came up, and we talked about the need for performance measures and for a check-in on exactly those things. Those projects identified for the downtown, what is the status of those in 5 years, and what does that mean for the plan? What does that mean for the increment in 7 years? Whatever those appropriate check-ins are, because if those projects have not been accomplished in 7 years, you're not going to have the TIF for the other elements and other programs that we've identified in here. But it is doing more than those few projects. It's using those few projects to then still have the full life of the CRA to be able to do the additional projects.
Also, there was discussion, I think you brought it up, that right now the only thing we can do in the CRA is bond and give money, and that there are other things that CRAs can typically do as incentives for developers to do projects.
Right.
Is that being addressed in this?
That is. That's where we put in here in the redevelopment support. Goal 14, one of the specific programs we have in here is, this is where many of those programs will be, but so one of the things that you can do, and many CRAs do, is provide a recapture of the tax increment to a project, of the net new taxes that it generates. And what the plan does is the plan authorizes that sort of program. And then the CRA board, with advice of this board, would develop the specific program guidelines for those different programs. So a TIF recapture would say, you know, here are the minimum thresholds we want. You can say here's the targeted uses we want. So we want mixed use development of at least X units an acre, or you can define however you want those to be. You can say we want to target student housing, we want to target different things, and you would identify a percentage of the new taxes they generate that would get recaptured. It would be a grant agreement back to that project, for example. That's one of the best tools you have, because you're right, up front and in the early days of a CRA, you don't have the cash to fund out, but it provides a continuing cash flow to a project as it comes to market. And it also requires that they actually come to market and CO and get a new taxable value. Those types of programs are in here. because you may use those for a lot of different elements, including, it will be one of the elements that's used for the P3s, for example. It usually will come in as one component of the capital stack for those P3s.
So if a developer comes in, you say, if you do these things, then we will refund your real estate taxes, or your county and city taxes, real estate taxes, every year for 15 to 30 years.
Correct.
And so that's probably about, I don't know, what would that be, 20% of their operating costs, something like that?
What did it come out? We looked at one, North Miami Beach just did one. It really depends on what those percentage thresholds are for the recapture.
Right.
And so there's, like Boynton Beach does a 35% recapture. There's another, I think it's Lake Worth, that does 100% recapture. What North Miami Beach does is they do a 50% recapture, and then you can apply for an additional 25% if you provide certain public benefits, and they have a menu of 6 things. It can be LEED certification of the building, it can be public and open space, it can be art in public places, it can be infrastructure work, greenways. So the projects there along Snake Creek Canal are spending $700,000 on the public right-of-way along the canal to build a canal walk. For that, and you would tie those 2 elements and projects in your plan. And so, for example, that greenway map and all those open spaces that you saw in here, you would want those public benefits that are consistent with your CRA plan provided by those projects that receive those incentives. Now, in some cases, it may be public parking. There may be someone coming in, and that recapture may be what, remember, we did the financial feasibility of the different garage scenarios, and a couple of those scenarios didn't really look good for a public-private partnership, looked good more for just a municipal garage. If you start bringing some recapture, this sort of incentive in, then it starts looking more attractive because of what it does to the cash flow as it moves forward.
Is there anything else that CRAs do that's not in this plan? That's not in this plan that's attractive?
If CRAs do it and it's attractive, it's in this plan.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
If CRAs do it and it's attractive, if it's successful, we're giving the CRA the ability to implement those programs.
Well, we need the help, that's for sure.
Kevin, do you have a percentage that you think is gonna be a percentage that we're gonna go just move forward with? You have a percentage you're gonna recommend yet?
Not yet, but we'll have,
What about Tuesday?
oh yeah, we'll have when we get to this on Tuesday, you're gonna see even more numbers, which is gonna look at each of these city, county, west, east, this, that, at what does 50% look like, what does 60%, what does 75% district look like, what do those different elements look like, in order to really get to the place that would be the right request to Miami-Dade County.
And can you kind of explain to them what we're gonna have to give up for us to get the extension from the county with the percentages, that we're gonna have to give something up? That's gonna determine what the percentage is gonna be. I don't know if everybody gets that.
That's really somewhere where this return on investment, once we figure out what's that cushion and what's that right range to make sure that the plan is implementable, it'll be somewhere out of this number. And again, you'll see that in those different percentages are gonna show you what does this also mean to the city general fund, what does this also mean to the county general fund? Because one thing that we have heard is concern towards the city general fund for providing services to the city, especially, I mean, Solomia, if you end up with 6,000 residents, there is a city service demand there. There will be a city service demand in the west side from outside of what the CRA can do, but regular municipal services from this sort of success in redevelopment will drive the need for additional municipal services. So it's going to be important to come up with that right balance.
So the $150 million, it's the cost of the project, or might be higher?
That's what our estimates on the plan implementation in current dollars is $150 million.
Kevin, so what is gonna be the change, what are you recommending as a change of percentage for the city and county, TIF on the east side where the solar meter project is?
We don't have that recommendation yet.
Oh.
We're gonna have more of the detail in those different scenarios on the 12th with the board, and need that final input to really walk them through and hear their thoughts on those different elements to be able to come up with that final recommendation, which is part of the plan that we would bring back in February.
So that the county wants some of the money back?
Yes.
And the city wants some of the money back?
Yes.
They need it because of the city services that will be needed
Correct.
in the expansion of the solar meter project?
Correct.
Not only that, any redevelopment you do,
You need
If
more
it's in
city
a downtown.
services, yeah.
yeah, if you're bringing new residents in downtown, you're gonna have additional
And-
service need.
And really to what the county, the conversation with the county was, it was a little more than just what are those 3 or 4 projects. It was really, tell us what you're gonna do, how much it's gonna cost, and then return what's left to the taxing authorities. That's really what they were, what the message sort of was.
Just listening to all the conversations on record. So, one of the things the chairman just brought up is to keep in mind, the county already gets back the TIF from the west side. Okay, the CRA never gets to keep that. We keep it during the fiscal year, and that was negotiated at the time we did the interlocal so that we could earn interest on that money. It used to be a large number. We used to earn about $60,000 a year on it. Now it's a small number. So Kevin is going through a lot of different scenarios where there could be 50% on the west side and 50% on the east side, boundary changes where you could even have Sol Me on the east side not even in the CRA anymore, which then maybe increase the west side to 75% to produce the same value, the same TIF.
You mean the county portion of the west side?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, those projections would include the county letting us keep the west side, the CRA keep the west side, but we give up the whole east side. Because Sol Me, we are all hopeful and assume and presume and that it will get built. I mean, the CRA was premised on Biscayne Landings getting built 10 years ago, and that's never happened. So having an increase on the west side is something that, assuming the market continues to go the way it's going, is something that you can probably is more predictable than a project that's not completed yet.
So to just sort of theoretically walk through that, say that was one of the scenarios, was a boundary modification, which was only the west side. You can see here the west side, and let's be clear, the plan that we have developed, the prior plan's really focused on Biscayne Landing, and that project being what would fund projects throughout the CRA. What we've done is done a plan that's a redevelopment plan for the west side. And it's successful on its own. It's a west side redevelopment plan. It's for these corridors. It's projects and initiatives in these corridors to revitalize the west side. So if you did, or you were starting from scratch today with a CRA on the west side, this plan, our projection is it will generate $206 million in today's dollars. So if you 95% that, you're at about $195 million. So you've got plenty to implement this plan and still have $175 million left over that could be returned to the taxing authorities. It's those sorts of scenarios are all the different options that are out there. A 50% district in this total piece, still getting rid of that rebate back to the county. If you took it to 50%, you'd be at, what's that, 180? About $180 million net present value. Those are, kind of to your question earlier, Clark, about the more complicated and creative ways. Those are the two traditional ways the CRA is done, is a straight percentage, which in this case, 50% would be one. And also a 95% district on the west side would be one that would fully fund the plan implementation and would be simple CRA standard methodologies.
I like diversity, so I'd like to take a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and of course, the county is very involved in this because they're the ones that ultimately have the yes or no. They're the ones who ultimately approve it. So, you know, man proposes and the county disposes, you know, kind of thing.
I think I need to mention, and what Clark just said about diversity, you know, in a boundary modification, you are putting all of your eggs in the west side.
Right.
Now, the other way you're spreading it out, and you're relying on everything, you know, going as it's projected. You know, we're confident in the plan and the initiatives that we've identified for the west side, but you would spread the risk more doing it through the current boundaries. But the plan is focused on the west side and to generate the TIF on its own on the west side.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, very much.
Thank
Any
you.
other
Lots of work,
questions?
very nice, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other
Do
questions?
we need any action on this tonight?
No,
No.
it's just a
No.
presentation updating you.
Yeah.
It'll come back in February. That's when we'll ask for your recommendation.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all very much.
Quickly, as part of the executive director's report, I have Major Beige here. Yes. The CRA, as you recall, funded a CRA public safety officer.
Yes.
And we did say we'd present reports and so on, and I was very happy when we were talking about what they've done. So I wanted to show you a sampling of what these officers have been doing with our CRA dollars.
Okay.
You set? Okay, thank you for having us this evening. I brought one of the CRA officers that actually works the detail right there, Officer Boney. And basically since November 19th, we've worked the CRA detail on a limited time, and since November 30th on a full-time basis, which is scheduled we presented to you before, which was 5 hours in the morning time from 9 to 2, and then 5 hours in the evening time from 5 to 10, except for on the weekends, on Friday and Saturday. They stay till 2 a.m. since there's more activity on the Friday and Saturday nights. And so far, unless Officer Boney has anything different, all the businesses they've gone into and everybody else has been very receptive and very glad and very pleased to see the CRA officers out there. They've made contact with 136 business operators and provided them information about security and safety in the CRA area. In addition, they performed 334 business checks. And the difference between a business contact and a business check, a business contact, they actually go in and speak with the business owner, spend a few minutes in the business, talk to them about crime trends in the area, how to target hard in their business and everything else. A business check is pretty much where they just walk around the business, maybe at night, try the doors to make sure they're locked. So that's the difference between a business contact and a business check. They also check the parking lots 181 times. And a parking lot check is not when they drive by a parking lot at 30 miles an hour. It's actually where they stopped in the parking lot, maybe sat in the parking lot for 5 or 10 minutes, see who goes from and to the parking lots. If there are any cars in the parking lot, they run the tags. If they're there late at night, if there are any suspicious looking vehicles, they would check out the vehicles or the people for the parking lot checks. In addition, they answered 9 calls of service for expedient police services in the CRA district, so they would not have to wait for the calls to come up through the regular dispatch process. And they also made contact with 419 people that are walking through the CRA or in the businesses, or they had conversations with 419 people on the street. Because one of the primary focuses is that we wanted the officers walking up and down the street. One of the officers, Kevin Kespro, rides his bicycle through the CRA, so we really wanted that personal contact within the CRA district. Some of the highlights, and there were a lot to go through, so I just picked 4 really that highlighted the efforts of the officers in the CRA. One of them was an elderly lady outside the plaza across the street. One of the officers saw her kind of looking disorientated. She was with a younger male that was kind of her caretaker, but the officers thought it was a little bit suspicious because of how she looked, the quality she was in, the quality of life she was, basically her physical appearance. He investigated a little bit, and it was probably an elderly abuse case, so I was forwarded to our investigative unit and to DCF for follow-up and for assistance for the elderly lady. Another officer was patrolling the CRA, and in the south alleyway behind 125th Street, they noticed a male and female having a very loud verbal argument. The officer approached the female and actually saw that the argument was probably physical because she had marks on her. And he intervened and spoke with the lady, was able to separate the 2 parties, and they wound up arresting the gentleman for domestic violence because they were boyfriend, girlfriend living together, and they provided the female with shelter, and counseling information for an opportunity for her to get out of the abusive relationship. So that was an arrest that probably would not have been made, or an action that may not have been taken, if nobody would have called the police and the CRA officer was not in the area at the time. Another highlight was a suspicious male was hanging outside of business. The officer approached him, engaged him in conversation, got his name, date of birth, ran him through the criminal record system, and found out he had outstanding warrants for arrest. So that was somebody that possibly could have been casing businesses, looking for a burglary to commit or something else. So that was a person that was removed out of the CRA district. Another one, and this is kind of a one that really shows the time that we're in right now in 2016, was a drone was flying over City Hall. And the drone was actually part of an IT project. And we were aware that IT was going to film around City Hall. We just weren't aware that they were going to use a drone to film City Hall. So the officer approached the drone operator, because it was a bigger, larger commercial drone, and basically confronted him and asked him what was going on, challenged the individual, and verified with IT and with city staff that the person was supposed to be out there actually filming, and that there wasn't anything else going on with the drone activity. So that was another good example to show what the CRA officer was doing out there at the time. In addition, we attended the Art Basel and Art Basel after party and Jazza Mocha on Christmas Day. We had the officer work that evening, and it was actually a very large crowd at the Jazza Mocha on Christmas Day. They brought in a band that had a big following, and that worked out really well. And I know one of the issues that the board asked us and the advisory committee had also asked is the crime. What actually goes on in the CRA district? So we looked at the crime. We looked from the 19th to the 30th when we were working at part-time, and there were no major Part 1 crimes. And we define a major Part 1 crime as a burglary, robbery, rape, theft, vehicle burglary. It's the ones that the FBI report, and when they talk about Part 1 crimes, and they talk about ups and downs in crime percentage, that's the crimes they look at. Other crimes such as drug sales, fraud, are Part 2 crimes, which are not really captured in the FBI UCR reporting. And for the Part 1 crimes, from the 1st to the 15th, there was a person on the 9th that was making an ATM withdrawal, and he claims that he forgot to exit out of there, and the person behind him actually withdrew some money. So we look at that as a careless theft. And that's one of the things that we preach to the CRA officers and all our officers is really education about these careless items like that go on. When somebody leaves their cell phone out, somebody leaves the ATM machine open, these really careless thefts that no matter how much we police and how visible we are, will still probably occur. So that was a careless theft that took place at one of the banks. In addition, both banks, the Chase and the Bank of America on 9th and 10th Ave, have really commented on the interaction they've had with the CRA officer. And they've provided good information to the CRA officer about suspicious people that come into the bank, possible fraud subjects that have come into the bank. So we've really developed a good rapport with the two banks there in the CRA district. Another crime that occurred was a vehicle burglary on 9th Ave and 125th Street. The person left his wallet in an unlocked car. That is another thing that we preach all the time, to at least lock your cars and to remove any valuables from sight. And it works better if you remove the valuables from sight before you get to your final destination versus somebody seeing you put something in the trunk or the glove compartment. So that's another thing that we really preach to the businesses, or those 419 contacts they made on the street. These are some of the tips that we also give to the residents and business owners. There was also a purse snatching, which occurred on the 11th at 4 p.m., which was just before the CRA officer came on duty at 6th Court and 124th Street. That was just a crime of opportunity, we believe, where somebody walked out and somebody just ran up, grabbed the purse, and ran off with the purse. The other one we had was over the overnight hours on the 12th along 125th Street. A business was forced in through the front door, and they went right to the back office and forced into where they keep the money. And our investigative unit is trying to investigate that to see if there's any leads going on that. But that occurred sometime over the nighttime hours. There wasn't a good time of occurrence for that one. And the final one that we had was a theft on the 15th, where somebody left a set of keys on a restaurant table on 125 Street. They walked away from the table for a second, and they came back, their keys were gone. So that's another careless theft, and that's one of the things that we really try to preach to the business owners, the workers in the businesses, and the people we come into contact, is that you're your own best defense. That you have the increased visibility out there from the police department, that we go out there, we patrol, and we do our best to take proactive stance against crime, but it really ultimately boils down to yourself. You are your best defense for criminal activity. The information that I gave to you about the crimes that occurred was also shared with our CRA officers, and we try to do a reciprocal type thing where When we get the crime trends, we give to the CRA officers go back to the businesses to try and target harden them from the same crimes from recurring and happening again. But for at least the first month now, we feel the program has been very successful, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the CRA initiative, and we'll take any comments, concerns, criticism, or any other things that you may have to offer as the advisory committee.
More recommendations?
We have one officer or 12?
There's one officer that goes out. There's a total of about 6 to 7 officers that work it throughout the week, and one officer goes out from 9 a.m. to 2, and then from 5 again till 10. And we split the shift like that so we can really show visibility out there. And those are the prime hours. We wanted somebody to be there when the business is open in the morning, because one of the things that we had prior to the CRA officer going out was behind the McDonald's and the Taco Bell. There were some complaints of vagrants and other stuff in the alleyway, especially in the early morning hours. And as the businesses were opening, it was kind of unsightly for the businesses. So we went out there, we offered them assistance, we offered them help from different organizations, and we encouraged them that it's not really the place for them to hang out is in the alleyway. And they were all moved along. But that was one of the reasons we wanted from that 9 to 2. From 2 to 6, the department actually has an overlap where we have both shifts working out there. So we have pretty good police presence from 2 to 6. And then we wanted to bring the other officer in, the evening officer in at 5. So as City Hall is closing down, as the employees are leaving, as some of the earlier businesses are closing, somebody to be there for the businesses close. And we went to about 10, because the majority of the businesses, except for the bars and restaurants such as Billy's Pub, Mocha Cafe, Luna Star, Subway, and a few other restaurants, pretty much all close well before 10 o'clock. So that was the best usage of our resources with those hours.
Yeah, you know, we've had some bad ideas and good ideas through the years that I've been here with the CRA. I can say this one's one of the better ones. It really is. I've had people who were at Mocha say how good they felt to see uniformed officers walking around. They felt secure. And I had business owners who said the same thing, people who sit outside a Luna Star to say they saw the officers come by and they just gave them a feeling of security, and that, you know, and I think it's really going to make a big difference on 125th Street. So this has really been a good idea, and thank you, Major Page, for
No problem.
The report. And thank you. Okay, is there anything else from the Executive Director's report?
Mr. Attorney, no report?
No report. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank everyone. We're starting to get on the roll. We're having quorums. Thank everybody, and I think, as Kevin alluded, we have some great things coming up with the CRA. So you guys are going to be a part of some very special things going on in a really near future. So thank you guys for coming out. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you for coming. Is there any old business? Any new business? Motion to adjourn? All in favor?